People of the sports world, welcome back to another episode of the Shook Sports Takes podcast. Today's episode is the third and final of the Eastern Conference, where I'm giving my opinion on every NBA team's start to the season. Today will be the Southeast Division. I've already done the Northeast and the Central. If you want to go check those out, that would be unbelievably fantastic. So if you're not great with divisions, in this Southeast Division will be the Hawks, the Charlotte Hornets, the Orlando Magic, the Miami Heat, and the Washington Wizards. There is a lot of wild stuff that's happened so far in this NBA season. Um, just a lot to go over. That's why I'm making this one. I said that I would probably do one mid-season close to the All-Star break, and then I definitely do one at the end of the year to recap, and we'll continue to do them by division. Without further ado, we're going to kick things off with the Atlanta Hawks. Atlanta find themselves sitting at 8-5, fifth in the East. Now, they have done a lot of, you know, building in this team, and a lot of bench depth was acquired in this offseason, as well as obviously bringing in Kristaps Porzingis. But there was, going into the season before free agency, even at the end of last season, really, you looked at this roster and you thought, okay, well, they ended up getting pretty injured. Jalen Johnson was hurt at the end of last season, and there's a lot to talk about with Jalen Johnson. That guy's awesome. But it always felt like there was just a big drop off between the five starters and what was coming in off the bench. The bench was very inconsistent, and it was quite the issue, especially after they traded DeAndre Hunter. So there was a lot of question marks with this Atlanta team, and they have really answered it. They made the moves in the offseason. I think the biggest, obviously, being Porzingis, but Nikhil Alexander-Walker has been fantastic. But we'll get into that in a minute. So, yeah, they sit at 8-5, fifth in the East. They're battling, man. Trae Young has missed a lot of time already. That's rather unfortunate. He wasn't playing that great when he was healthy, but if there's one thing you sit and watch Trae Young and you just, he's going to be inconsistent. He's never going to be an efficient scorer. He's rather inconsistent, but when he gets hot, he is such a problem, and he's always going to have that playmaking element to him, right? So I wasn't super worried about him with a slower start to the season, especially when he's seeing less shots. They're increasing Jalen Johnson's role, and Kristaps Porzingis was obviously going to come in and take a lot of touches, a lot of shots. So the scoring numbers for Trey falling off didn't surprise me, and his assist numbers were still right around the mark that you would expect them to be. Um, yeah, he's going to continue to play at a very high level when he is healthy, when he gets back healthy. Even if he was starting slow, I expect him to figure it out. But obviously, Kristaps Porzingis, the biggest difference maker in this team so far. He gives a real scoring threat to this team alongside Trae Young, and now alongside Jalen Johnson. He's very good. I mean, he's sitting there he's pretty impactful on both ends. To be fair, he's just so tall that he can affect shots down low, and Kristaps Porzingis has continued to be what we know he is. He was the same player that we saw in Boston. There's a lot of, when we talk about Kristaps Porzingis, there's a lot of almost like disappointment with how his career has gone, because he was so hyped up in New York that first season. He was called a unicorn. He was something we hadn't seen before, and he never got to the level that some people made him out to. We thought he was going to be a superstar, right? So he's always been very, especially since getting to Boston, he's been great. He was pretty solid for Dallas as well, and he's going to play a role, but he was never built to be a superstar. And it's unfortunate in the sense that that's kind of how it played out, because there was flashes that he was just going to be one of the best big men in the league, and it never quite played out. But the biggest story for Atlanta is Jalen Johnson. I've already said his name so many times. He is averaging 21, 9, and 6. He's just absolutely hooping. He's unbelievably athletic. He gets downhill so well. He's big, so he's on the glass. Pretty solid defender as well. Again, his athleticism helps with that a lot, but he's also added a slight element of playmaking. 6 assists this season on average. He's really coming into his own, and I predicted at the very start of the year. If you there's on this channel, there's a hot takes for the NBA season video. Please do go see that as well. I said he'd be an all-star, and I thought about it after putting it out, and I was like, there's a chance that this looks really stupid. But no, he is playing at an extremely high level at the moment. just really fits into this team because Trey is the perimeter threat. Porzingis is also more of a perimeter threat, so they give him the free range to, when he gets the ball, drive downhill and find a way to the cup, which he is so good at. So credit to him, man. He's really balling. Um, his last game was a 31, 18, and 14 triple double against Utah. I mean, it's just ridiculous, man. He is hooping. And again, I said he'd be an all-star. It's looking like it could very much be on the cards, especially if this Atlanta team continues to play as well as they are. But then, I said the biggest issue with this squad was the depth off the bench, and they have a lot of role players doing a lot of great things. Nikhil Alexander-Walker is averaging 17 points off the bench. Vit Krejci, he's shooting the lights out from beyond the arc. He's had a couple of big games in their last few. Um, and even Onyeka Okongwu has continued to do a lot of good things. He ended up starting a lot of games at the end of last season, and he's been pretty effective off the bench, coming in for Porzingis and stepping back into the starting lineup when Porzingis has missed time. And that's been probably the biggest aspect as to why the Hawks are having more success than they did last year. But at the end of the day, I still think they probably end high playing. Maybe they sneak into one of those low playoff teams. I've said that about a lot of teams in the East because it's so. The East is really going to come down to what team can be the hottest for the longest stretch. And I know that sounds really simple, but some of these teams that are fighting between the play-in and those low playoff spots, there's not a lot of consistency. It's going to depend a lot on how healthy these teams can stay. Um, so that range of what the playoffs is actually going to look like down the stretch of the season is pretty up in the air this early anyway. The Bulls started 5-0, but they've really cooled off. This Hawks team can be kind of wishy-washy. Can the 76ers stay healthy? So there's a lot of teams in this East that I think are going to end up in this range of high, somewhere in the play-in to low playoff seeds, and it's really just going to depend on who can stay the hottest the longest. And Atlanta's one of those teams, man. Um, they could end up the sixth and the last seed in the playoffs. They could, if they get really hot, they could end up in a 4. I think that's the highest I would see them. But it's going to be really interesting. I do like this Hawks roster, and it just depends on how crazy the East really gets at the end of the season. Brings us to what is pretty much the nightmare of the Charlotte Hornets. There have been so many seasons now that Charlotte have just not had it, and it feels like it's going to continue to go that way this season. Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, again, continuously not staying healthy. Brandon Miller is not shooting well when he has played. While LaMelo's looked all right, LaMelo is, still the center focus of this offense. But he just doesn't stay healthy a lot, and it's kind of a nightmare, excuse me. But the bright side is Concanepple has been fantastic, so fantastic to the point where him and I think VJ Edgecombe are the two real front runners for Rookie of the Year. Concanepple averaging 16 and 6, shooting 49% from the field and 39% from three. Not much more you can ask him. He's really stepped up early. When LaMelo and when Brandon Miller haven't played, he's been the go-to guy on offense. He's knocking down his shots. He's getting to his spots well, and he looks really comfortable. This isn't really something I knew he was good. I didn't think he'd impact an NBA team like this quickly. I saw him really being a role player this year and maybe into next, but it is Charlotte, so they've had to look for opportunities for certain guys to find buckets, and he's been that guy alongside Miles Bridges, who's still doing his thing on offense. He's averaging 21 and 7, but there's just not a lot else for the Charlotte team outside those four. Diabate's done some good things as well. I like Colin Sexton. He's not been as impactful on offense as I thought he was going to be as their sixth man. But other than that, I mean, this roster is they're just not cutting it. It's pretty miserable. They're pretty lost on defense at times. They're not going to compete with good teams really, and they might steal games here and there. With LaMelo having a huge night, or maybe Concanepple has a big night. Brandon Miller gets back on track, and they'll steal games here and there. They took one off of Milwaukee, even though Giannis didn't play, so that's not as impressive it might sound. But I mean, they're going to be bottom feeders again, and the only good thing I can say about this Charlotte team is it feels like they might start to go in the right direction. Um, with some of they look like they're drafting better, and there's a few pieces there. You just you need to stay healthy between Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, and you've got to figure out some really good pieces off that bench to come in and make an impact. Um, Not every night, but enough to where you can win games, and they just don't have it, man. It's a nightmare to be a Charlotte Hornet fan, probably, I would assume. And I don't want to harp on them too much, but there's just not a lot going for them. Even in a weak East, they're not gonna make the play-in. Um, but yeah, like I said, if they continue to draft well, do the right things when they are getting a chance to go get their guy, maybe they can turn it around 2-3 years. I just don't see it happening any quicker than that. And yeah, it's just gonna be another really ugly year for Charlotte, man. We get to the Miami Heat, who's one that I have really sat and thought about for quite some time. Probably the most I've thought about a team yet. Because it's not as much as what they're doing now, because they're succeeding right now. They sit at 7-5 in the East. They're eighth in the East. They've looked like they can really compete. They gave the Knicks a game and beat them. They gave the Cavs a game and beat them. But then, they've had some silly losses here and there. I know I said 7-5. They just lost. They're now 7-6. They just lost to the Knicks thanks to Cat and Landry Shamet going crazy. But, you know, this team is a lot of fun, and they should be able to really make a push beyond the play-in this season. Once Tyler Hero gets healthy, he has not played at all. Bam Adebayo has now missed a strand of games here. He's still not played as of their last game. But the thing for me about the Heat is what happens when Tyler Hero comes back, and I'll explain that in a minute. So I want to go over Jaime Jaquez has been fantastic as the sixth man. He's coming off the bench, 17, 7, and 5, just really efficient goal bucket getting. He is scoring at will almost. He's very good in the lane now. He's still not really developed a great three ball, but they don't want that from him. They don't need it from him. They have guys to do that. And so they've seen the success out of Jaquez, who's really taken, I think this is his third year in the league, really taken another jump, and that's been great for them. Norman Powell looks fantastic. He looks exactly like he did back for the Clippers last season. He is shooting the lights out, 46% from three, averaging 24 points per game. I mean, it's exactly what you wanted from Norman Powell when you brought him in free agency. Compared that with the way Wiggins and Bam are still playing. Bam's averaging 22. Wiggins has got 15 on every given night, 15 to 18. And then Davion Mitchell is running this offense as the point guard. He's bringing the ball up the floor, and he's got a lot of things going for him. Just dishing it out really well, averaging 7.6 assists on the season per game. He's just really playing great, and not to mention how good of a perimeter defender Davion Mitchell is. He really sets the tone for this Heat backcourt. And then Kel'el Ware is doing his job. He's averaging close to a double-double, if he isn't already. He had a great night the other night. I think he had 20 boards when they went to OT with the Cavs. He's doing his job as well, and I think the nice thing about starting Kel'el Ware every night is that when Bam is healthy, he can play the four. I think that is where Bam is more naturally fitted to play. Granted, the fact that I think he's 6'9", which is small for a center in the NBA, which sounds crazy, but I think Bam's game style just fits more as a power forward rather than down low as the center. But that's where you run into an issue, right? Is that I do think that they are fantastic. With the way they've been playing, and they look a lot of fun on offense. But with the starting five of Mitchell, Powell, Wiggins, Bam, and Kel'el Ware, Tyler Hero does come back soon, eventually, at whatever point he gets healthy. I don't know who you drop from that starting lineup. Now, the obvious decision is to move Bam to the 5 and play small ball with Tyler, Davion, Norman, and Wiggins. But I think that when they play a team like the Cavs again, they're going to get bullied because Wiggins can't guard Evan Mobley. So, you're going to constantly have to play the Knicks, or a big team too. So when you come up against the best sides of the best teams in the East, you're going to get outmatched if you try to line up that way. But if you don't drop Kel'el Ware, I don't know which one of these guys from the front court or Wiggins you drop. because Wiggins, again, gives you that size to match up with most other threes. Norman Powell's a little bit too small to play the three, but he can play there. And Davion Mitchell runs your offense and is your best perimeter defender, so he can't really be dropped. And I don't want to have to pick between Norman Powell and Andrew Wiggins. So it is extremely interesting. I almost wonder. This is going to sound kind of crazy. Norman Powell came off the bench as the sixth man for the Clippers last season. I almost wonder if they do something like that with him when Tyler Hero gets healthy. I wonder if that was talked about when he originally signed. That could be a possibility. And it wouldn't surprise me if they went Davion with Tyler Hero and Wiggins, and then had Norman come off. That way, he's not affecting how many shots he gets in when he comes into the game, checks in off the bench. But then you're limiting Jaquez and his touches when he's in there with the bench rotation. I don't think that would be a massive impact, considering the fact that they don't score the same way, and they've been playing. Jaquez has been closing games with them, so he doesn't necessarily play the same way, and they're going to continue to get their buckets here and there either way, because they get them separately and they do them differently. So maybe that wouldn't be a massive impact, but I don't know, man. I really like the way Norman's playing as the starting two, and I just don't think that you can play Norman and Tyler Hero and drop Davion Mitchell. But I think that might be the most likely solution, is that either Khalil Ware gets dropped and they play small, or they drop Davion Mitchell, have him come off the bench and run the offense through there. Either way, I think this Miami team, once Tyler Hero gets healthy, is a lot of fun. I still think they're another one of these teams, though, that ends up low playoffs, somewhere in the play-in, and has to fight through the play-in to get into the postseason. But whatever way you look at it, this Miami roster is better than they were last year. I mean, I hadn't even talked about Jovic still being a pretty effective piece, even though he's not playing all that well. And I just think that the depth in this team is something to be excited about. I was a little bit worried when they lost Duncan Robinson, because he had been so effective off the bench for them as a 3-and-D guy, but they haven't really struggled without him at all. Norman Powell's been a great free agency signing, so Miami are doing a great job, and I think no matter how they end up lining up, Eric Spoelstra is going to have it figured out. I mean, you don't be a coach in the NBA for as long as Eric Spoelstra has if you can't figure out something like that. So I do think that getting Tyler healthy makes this team even more dangerous, and there's a lot of hype around this Miami team for me, to see what they can do, and if they can continue to be this. They're just scoring a lot. I mean, their defense isn't stellar, but they're just outscoring teams, which is kind of what you have to do to win games in the modern NBA. And it doesn't matter who they play, because they've played the two best teams, in my opinion, in the East, and they beat both of them in thrillers. So, I mean, whatever they're doing is working, and I'm excited to see how Miami can continue to move and coast through the rest of the season. On the agenda is the Orlando Magic, who sit at 7-6, ninth in the East, and this was a team I was pretty high on coming into the season. You look at the weak East, you see Boston and the Indiana Pacers so injured and missing their two best guys. It was a pretty wide open outside of the Knicks and the Cavs, and this Magic team was a team I thought could, alongside with the Detroit Pistons, that could really push to be that 3 seed, that 4 seed, and they have not started and proved any of that so far. It's been a really interesting season so far for them. They sit 7-6, just over 500. Now, they played great against the Knicks, and they beat them, who were on a 5-game win streak, but then they just lose some silly ones, and I don't know, man. Franz Wagner might be one of the most consistent players in the NBA. He's consistently giving you at least 17 to 20 points every night, 22 points, average 22 on the season. So it's more 17 to 24. It just feels like he is getting his buckets, and he's pretty efficient as well. And he's bringing you 20, or he's bringing you 6 boards as well, and he's just doing a great job of being the offensive constant in this team, really, because Paolo's been pretty inconsistent, and Desmond Bane has not started well on the offensive side of the floor. So he's been the one cornerstone night in, night out, giving you 20 points. And I love that about him. I think he's great. I think he's on pace for another All-Star appearance, no doubt about it. And I like him a lot. But then look at the rest of this team. Jalen Suggs just got back. He's doing a great job defensively, but he has not scored well. Not that that's really his game. He's a good 3-point shooter. Hasn't shown that so far this season. Um, and him getting healthy is a big thing for them because they were really struggling on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they were giving up 125 points a night pretty consistently. And it was a nightmare early, and they started to figure out a rhythm now. But now Paolo Banchero is hurt. He came out with a knee injury after the Knick game. He had been doing his thing, right? Posting up. He likes to shoot threes a lot. He's a pretty solid 3-point shooter. He's nothing special. He's not super efficient. But then he'll remember that he's like 6'7" and just drive at a guy, post him up, and shoot that little fadeaway that he has consistently knocked down. And it's kind of been his go-to move. And he's consistently, I mean, he's not consistently, he's still scoring at a pretty high volume. But it just isn't as often as it should be, really. And he's struggling to find ways to bring that consistency to every night. And so be it. But now he's hurt. Now they're going to miss him. That's really unfortunate for this team because he is still very much their best player. I think that's almost without a doubt. And then you have Desmond Bane, who, I mean, is only averaging 15, but he's kind of taken on this running the offense role that he didn't really have in Memphis, that was more tailored to Ja Morant's play. So he's actually creating a lot for other players when he's not scoring himself, and that's been a big piece to his team. He just needs to find the rhythm of his shooting. He's not shot well from behind the arc. He's getting to the basket pretty well. Again, the game against the Knicks, he was pretty effective in that game because he was continuing to get downhill, driving at Brunson, driving it at Mikal Bridges as well, and it was working out for him. I'd like to see him continue to be aggressive, getting to the hoop, and that's how this team is gonna start to pick up some wins here if they can just find a consistent way to run this offense. If it's through Franz Wagner, if it's through Desmond Bane creating for other guys, whatever it is, they've got to figure it out. And that is the theme with this Magic team, is the inconsistency is killing them, and it's something that I'm sure they will find a rhythm at some point, and then they might go on one of those hot streaks. They were super hard to start last season, and then they saw Paolo get hurt, and then they saw Franz get hurt, and then Mo Wagner started to carry, and he hasn't played all season from that same ACL injury, that tear that he had after last season. I'm super excited to see if he can get healthy, because I think he adds a really big element down low for this team, something that they desperately need to kind of offset Goga Batadze and Wendell Carter Jr. He's a very effective piece off the bench, Mo Wagner, and he was really starting to hit his stride before he tore his ACL last season. This kind of just feels like the opposite. Maybe they start super slow and then pick it up. And I think if they can get going, if Banchero can get healthy and then start to score at an efficient rate, and if Desmond Bane can go back to shooting the three the way we know he can shoot, this team is going to be very, very difficult to play against. And another element of that is getting some support off this bench, because Anthony Black and Tristan da Silva are pretty good. They just don't do it enough at a high enough rate, consistently enough. Again, it's an issue with how often you do it, how consistent can you be, and they aren't consistent. I like the way that Anthony Black can attack the rim. On his good nights, he shoots the ball pretty well. Tristan da Silva, very different than anything else in this Magic team. Very tall for his position. He shoots the ball really well. Pretty solid ball handler as well. Both are pretty decent on defense, but again, the element of their scoring isn't, night in, night out enough, and so they aren't. Now they'll help him. Maybe Tristan da Silva was pretty solid against the Knicks. Turn around their next game, he doesn't play well, and so it's just, again, I don't have anything for this Magic team that is not about consistency. The rest of their bench isn't fantastic. They are starting to lose games when their starters come out. It starts to run away from them. That's what the fight the Knicks put up with them. That's why that game was close, because the bench went in and they couldn't hold it down. But then Desmond Bane and Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner come back in. It's a different story. And Franz Wagner left that game early. I think he came out in the third. and that was a rough period for them. So really, if those three can stay and find rhythm, I think this Magic team is still dangerous. I really do. At 7-6, they're still above 500 after 13 games. I do like this roster, and I think that they can be a solid team, a very good team out in the East, even if they can just become consistent. To the only team I haven't talked about in the Eastern Conference yet, the Washington Wizards. Now, I know they sit at 1-11, and they are 15th in the Eastern Conference. However, there's actually more to like about this Wizards team than dislike, and they're not going to win games. Like, you have to come into the expectation that this Washington team is, again, going to be toward the bottom of the East. I'll start with the negatives first because that's what everyone's going to assume that I'm going to talk about with the Wizards. Bilal Coulibaly is not quite what he was expected to be when they drafted him. He has not really hit that stride yet. He just hasn't hit that full potential. It's weird because he's pretty inefficient, but he has his moments. He has his nights where he looks great. And he's still, a solid rebounder, and he does impact games. He's just not scoring at the rate that you want to see him scoring, and it's holding the Wizards back when he plays. And then you have Chris Middleton, who is just not the same, and I think that's why I think Milwaukee knew that, and that's why they were willing to give him up. Yeah, it might just be time to call it quits. It's getting close to time to call it quits for Chris Middleton, who has not been very impactful at all for this Wizards team, a team that you would have thought that he would have come into, played some great defense, and continued to find a lot of scoring with a lot of shots, high volume, leading them to scoring a lot of points, but he hasn't done it at all. He's not even averaging 10, I don't think. I think it's closer to 8 and 9. Just not been a factor at all. But then you move into the pieces that are playing well. Now, CJ McCollum started really slow, and that was a tough watch. It really was. But since then, his last three, he's gone for, I think it was 17, 18, and 25. He's been much more consistent with his scoring. His three is starting to fall. The only thing with CJ McCollum is I don't expect him to be a Wizard by the deadline. I actually talked about this in the Central Division. I was talking about Milwaukee, and I think that's a team that would like a guard that can score effectively, and that's what they need. And I don't think a 30, I think it's 33, maybe even 34. I don't think that helps the Wizards right now. Like, sure, because they're not in a win now mode, right? They want draft picks, they want capital, and they want young talent that they can develop. And obviously CJ doesn't fit either of those, even if he is scoring at a really high rate. This team's not gonna have anything to play for come the deadline, so I think they're gonna give him up and receive either some capital or maybe one of the couple young guys that's in this Bucks team. That's the ideal place that he could go for me. He could end up in quite a few different spots, but I do not expect him to be a Wizard at the deadline. And that brings you to Alex Sarr and Keyshawn George, who have both been really, really good. Alex Sarr's taken that jump to the player that we did think he would be when he came into the NBA last season. We're looking at him just do both things. He's scoring. He's averaging 19, almost 20, and then he's getting 8 boards a game, shooting 53% from the floor. He's been efficient, and he's just really looking like the guy that we thought he was going to be when he got here. He's another talent out of France, which was a big thing after Wemby, and he is very good. He is hard to defend for a lot of bigger centers because he is kind of agile. He's pretty, and I'm not gonna say kind of. He is very agile for his position, so he just gets at some of these guys. He's too agile, too athletic for them to deal with when he gets down low, and he's been really effective. And so that is a huge bonus for the Wizards to have this guy sprouting at the time that he is, because now you can build your franchise around him, right? That is your guy at this point. And Keyshawn George has been fantastic, and that is not something I saw coming at all at the start of this season. He's really, really turning it up, shooting 49% from three. That's insane. He's just rolling, man. He's averaging 15, 6, and 4. He's doing a lot of things for this team, just shooting the lights out, man. And he's not taking a lot of shots, so he's not scoring, but he is being so efficient from behind that arc. It's been really impressive to watch him go to work. His bag work to create his own shots when he's not catching and shooting is pretty impressive. And he's been a very bright light and a pretty poor team that the Wizards have filled their roster with, and yet they're looking better. Like now, the losses are still coming, but they're losing in a much more respected manner. They're not just getting blown out every night, right? And when you take into account the fact that Cam Whitmore is not playing enough games, Cam Whitmore has to play more minutes. He is very good. You traded with Houston, and you ended up taking on Cam Whitmore, a guy that you saw with a lot of potential, who just wasn't given a chance in Houston. And then early in the season, they weren't giving him the chance themselves. When he has played at least 18 minutes, he's averaging 14 points. The more latter of those games, I think it's been like only 5 or 6 games that he's played that many minutes. He's averaging close to 18 to 20. He's been very efficient, and he is a bucket. I mean, that is what Cam Whitmore is going to come into the game to do. He doesn't need to start. He just needs to see more minutes because he scores at will. He is one of those guys that makes a lot of difficult shots, and you're okay with taking difficult shots because the odds are they might go in. Probably will go in. So I want to see Cam Whitmore get more involved with this Wizards team when they don't really have anything to lose anyway. Why wouldn't you take this opportunity to really develop a guy? And you know what? If they end up trading CJ at the deadline, that's who I'm seeing step into that starting role because he is. We knew he was a scorer in Houston. It was obvious, but he wasn't given a chance. And then, he had a falling out with Ime Udoka, and that was kind of the end of it for him in Houston because he was unhappy with how much he was playing. And so I think Washington are acknowledging now that he is going to be a good piece for them, at least a solid role player off the bench who's going to come in. He's going to play the Jordan Clarkson role, right, where he comes off the bench, and the only thing on his mind is how can I get buckets. But yeah, man, he does a great job when he's given the minutes, and so I wanted to see that continue. It's going to be another rough year for the Wizards. In terms of record, they're not going to make the play-on, but you can see things starting to pick up and trend in the right direction, and that is a huge bonus for a franchise who hasn't seen success since John Wall and Bradley Beal. Take that back. Russell Westbrook took them to the playoffs, so my fault, Russ. But they have not seen a lot of success in the recent years. Obviously, they've been bottom of the pile for the last 2-3 seasons, but things are starting to pick up in favor of Washington. You add 2 more pieces, give it a year or 2, and I think this team could start to make their way to a place where they could make some noise. So that is the Eastern Conference done. That was specifically the Southeast Division. Let me know your thoughts on all these opinions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear your feedback. But that is it, man. The Eastern Conference is a lot more open in the Western Conference. So there's a lot more variety of where I think teams can land. And when we get to the West, which will be started soon, it's going to be a lot more, this team is not making the playoffs. This team's not making the play-in. This team is, it's going to be a lot more seeding. It's going to be a lot more direct because it's a lot more obvious where teams are going to fit in. And because the West is so much stronger, man. So the East was and is a lot weaker. And we knew this, and so it was a lot more difficult to say where I think these teams end up, whereas the West is going to be a lot more direct. But that is the Eastern Conference done. Thank you all for tuning in, and enjoy your day.